The 3 worst financial crooks.
It's Brian Preston, the money guy.
Brian, I am really excited about this because I think this can be something that is very, very helpful to folks. It seems like there are always folks out there trying to get in our back pockets, trying to take our hard-earned dollars away from us. So if we can share some information that helps protect you from that, your financial well-being will be better because of it.
You excited about crooking?
Well, no, I'm excited about exposing crooking. I'm excited about exposing the crooking.
It is true. There are more people. We had a bank thing we had to send in, and they were like, your credit's frozen? Why is your credit frozen? That seems so crazy. I was like, because there's a lot more people trying to use my credit than me.
Yep.
So I protect myself from that. And I was kind of surprised somebody in the financial world would even have a question about that. But that's the type of stuff we're going to load you up with today. So, Bo, let's jump into the first one. I have to put a little bit of a disclaimer. The first financial type of crooks are some salesmen. Now, look, my dad was a salesman, so it's only the crookie type.
The crookie, that was so funny that you added that on there because we didn't even think about that. When we think, because we're so like in the financial world, when we hear salesman, we immediately jump to a negative because we hear so much about it. But just because someone's a salesman doesn't mean that they're bad. And just because someone is in sales in the financial industry doesn't mean they're bad. However, there are a lot of actors out there that maybe have a different motive when it comes to giving financial advice.
When I was in public accounting, I had no problem telling everybody, I'm an accountant, I'm a CPA. As soon as I became a financial advisor, I am hesitant to tell people I'm a financial advisor because I think they all assume I'm going to try to sell them some life insurance.
All right, so we have a video we're going to lay out to talk a little bit specifically in the insurance world about where and how this manifests. Check this out.
So guys, I'm not big on term insurance. I don't sell it. I'm not going to tell you it's a bad idea, but here's the thing. If I pay into a term insurance policy, let's say $100 a month for the next 20 years, right? I'm never going to see that money back. Did it give me cheap protection? Sure. Is it better than some other insurances? Sure. But the thing is if I do high early cash value dividend paying whole life insurance, I'm going to break even between years 4 and 7. Meaning I don't have to pay anything ever again if I don't want to. My cash value is more than I contributed. I've got death benefit coverage for the rest of my life. I can borrow against it, and my insurance cost was basically free.
Oh, man, he basically sold this thing for free.
He did. He said, this is great. This is one of the best things that you can do. This is one of the best financial products you can get into because, by the way, if you pay into term insurance, you never see that money again. I first think it's worth noting if you never see the money you paid for life insurance again, probably something worth celebrating. It means that you did not die. That's kind of a good thing to celebrate, right?
Well, I mean, it's one of those things. Imagine if somebody came out with an auto insurance policy that after 15 years, you got a portion, like 5%. And I guess some of the insurance companies do have some type of rebate thing like that. But if that insurance company was charging 4, 5, even 10 times more than other auto insurance companies, you probably wouldn't be as excited about that money coming back to you. Bo, you said something in pre-show planning is that because he did a lot of redirection there. He's like, I'm not saying it's bad, but, and then he proceeded to load it up with what?
Yeah, there were a lot of half-truths in there. So what he was saying, there were glimmers of truth in there around how permanent or whole life insurance works, but they were only half-truths. And there was a lot of stuff in there that if you were to dig deeper, you'd say, okay, maybe that's not quite the way it actually works out in the real world. So I think it's important for us to step back, Brian. Obviously, for someone who is not well-versed and doesn't know about this, when it comes to life insurance, there are really 2 types we like to talk about. When I talk about term insurance, when I talk about permanent insurance. What are the big differences in those 2?
Well, term, you're buying insurance. I mean, it is for a set period of time. It is giving you the protection and coverage, but it does go away, but that's okay because you're hoping. It's funny, I did one of those online tools recently where you type in all your assets, your income, your goals, and at the end it was like, hey, you're at the self-funded portion of life where you no longer need life insurance and all these other things. I think that's where everyone aspires to. So this whole thing that insurance should be forever and you should overpay while you're young so you have coverage when you're 85 years old might not be necessary. And that's actually, I don't mind being confessional. I only have term life insurance.
Same. Only kind of insurance.
And I have a lot of insurability on businesses, and others. Even if I don't need it, I'm still in the portion of the term where the cost is super effective.
Yep.
So there's no reason to cash it in. And here's what I always tell people when you're trying to figure out term, permanent, because there are times I have recommended permanent for some unique situations. But for a lot of people, term insurance is simple. You're buying coverage. Permanent is complex. Cost effective. Term, because you're only paying for the insurance, is very cost effective. Permanent is going to be a good bit more expensive. A lot more calculations, a lot more people involved, a lot more sales commissions. Third thing, term is very flexible, meaning that when you get to the point of the kids, like you choose your term for when the kids graduate, when you've reached financial independence, it can go away. Permanent, it actually can be a ticking time bomb later if it lapses or surrenders. There's all kind of things that can happen at a later point that you need to be concerned about. In other words, it's not as flexible. It's more rigid. It has restrictions and requirements that you need to be aware of.
So one of the things you may be asking is if permanent insurance is so much more complicated and there are these things there that make it more difficult, why do so many people talk about it? Why do we hear about it on social media and on TikTok and on Instagram? Well, there is a good chance it's because of how the business model is set up. It's really interesting when you look at the annual cost of life insurance for a healthy 40-year-old male. If they want to get $1 million policy right now, it costs about $600 a year. Well, you go out, you find an insurance agent, that insurance agent sells you that insurance, and about 60 to 70% of that first year premium that you pay goes to them as a commission. Again, they're a salesman, they're earning a commission, but not necessarily doing anything nefarious. So of your $600, about $360 goes to them. Well, then as time goes on and you get past the first year of the policy, term life and agents typically don't have any sort of residual payments. There's not a ton of renewal commissions that come through as it relates to term insurance. So I want you to think about that, kind of put that in your pocket. Now let's talk about permanent insurance. If you wanted to go buy $1 million permanent insurance policy for a healthy 40-year-old male, it's going to cost $15,500 a year. And the insurance agencies, when they have agents go out there and sell these products, oftentimes they'll pay a commission of up to 80 to 100%, sometimes even more of the first year commission. So an agent could sell you $1 million policy that costs you $15,500 a year, and their commission on that would be over $12,000.
Bo, if you pass away at 41, do you get $1 million with that $600 policy?
Yep.
Do you get more than $1 million with that whole life policy is $15,000?
Nope.
So the cost, the actual benefit is actually the same.
Yep, that's exactly right.
And here's what I think is interesting. When you're 40 years old, we could have done 33, we could have done 25, we did 40. 40 is still, there's a lot of life going on, meaning that you probably got kids that you're, if they're doing cheer competitions, if they've got traveling sports, if you've got trying to save 25% so you can retire at a decent age, there's a lot of things pulling at your back pocket. I bet you'd like to have that $14,800 instead of going to life insurance that you could use for savings as well as life for your family.
And then even after you get past the first year, a lot of permanent policies will actually pay something like a 5% commission annually. So not only can the agent make $12,000 in year one, they can make almost $800 every single year that you're paying that premium. And so it seems like there are some misaligned incentives if someone's not truly operating in your best interest. If they say, okay, this person needs $1 million of insurance and I'll make this much money selling them a permanent policy or this much money selling them a term policy, it's easy to see how people can go astray. It's easy to see that life insurance agents can often be skewed in what kind of advice they can make. They might be able to make tens of thousands of dollars over the life of a permanent policy, where they might only make hundreds of dollars over the life of a term policy.
This is and look, we're in a section. In a second we're gonna get to a section where we tell you how to protect yourself. But I do think before we transition from insurance salesman, don't find the young person that needs you to buy a product to pay for their family. Yep. And I know that's because I'm all about young energy and empowering people, but you got to be careful of hungry financial product salespeople, because you're like that Looney Tunes commercial when, where you're hungry and everybody looks like that slab of ham like they do, because you just got to be careful. Find somebody who you feel like that conflict of interest is minimized as much as possible.
So we've talked a little bit about, Brian, we've talked a little bit about insurance salesmen. I don't want to just pick on them because there are other folks in the financial industry. There are financial product salesmen that exist out there too, financial advisors that hold themselves out as financial advisors. Even inside of that world, you can see this same type of thing playing out.
Yeah, and look, we don't do specific product investment recommendations here because we want this to be educational, but it is one of those things where we do like to share best practices that you might want to consider and do research on, is like index funds. We love index funds because they're cheap. They beat, if you look at the long term, they beat like 80+% of the active management out there. There's a lot of good things that happen when you just buy the broad markets. But it's not uncommon when I talk to people about, hey, you have a financial advisor, and I hear a few brands that, hold themselves out as the neighborhood financial advisors for the country. And as soon as I hear that somebody has their money there, I'm like, oh, you're in American Funds, aren't you? I mean, because you just know it. I mean, they're kind of, even though it's not American Funds is the brand that's what they recommend because it's commission products. So we did a real quick snapshot of index investing versus one of the largest active management companies. More than likely, if you have that neighborhood financial advisory firm that's going around, knocking on doors, serving in the community, you probably have seen these type of products.
And when you look at these two, right, they invest in relatively the same thing. That, it's a large cap U.S. companies. When you look at the American Funds Growth Fund of America versus the Fidelity 500. So by and large, they're buying a lot of the same stuff. But look at this. When you look at the internal expense ratio, this doesn't have to do with the actual salesman selling the product, just looking at the operation of the fund. The American Fund's internal expense ratio of their A share is about 0.61% every single year. That's what it costs to keep the lights on, have the brochures, all that sort of thing. If you look at the internal operating expense of the Fidelity S&P 500 index fund, it's 0.015%.
I think let's say this in a clearer way. That American Funds, the Growth Fund of America, is over 0.5%. Whereas, and this is not a typo, and this is not a misspoken statement, the S&P 500 with the Fidelity S&P 500 index fund is just a slightly over 1%. So that is a 40 times difference in that cost structure.
But it's not just the internal operating expense, not just the 0.6 versus the 0.015. Oftentimes, these products are sold with a commission. And if you buy an A share of this fund, you can pay a front-end load up to as much as 5.75%. So if you want to buy $100 of this fund, immediately $5.75 goes to the salesman selling you the fund. When you look at a low-cost index fund like the S&P 500 from Fidelity, there is no front-end load. There is no commission when you sell the product. So you have to ask the question, okay, if I'm going to be buying this thing that is substantially more expensive, there needs to be a why. There needs to be some sort of payoff. So I said, okay, well, let's see. If we just look at the last 5 years, what's the performance of these two funds look like? They're buying relatively the same types of companies, investing in relatively the same way. Over the last 5 years, the American Funds, Growth Fund of America, as of August 5th of this year, is up about 21% over that time period. The S&P 500 is up almost 70, a little over 68%.
Now, look, I have to, because I love this slide. When I saw this come up in our content meeting, I was like, I love focusing on the expense because that definitely creates, if you're a person paying high internal expenses and high commissions, that is a headwind to your long-term performance. But when you see a threefold difference in performance, this is just a moment in time. And I want to make sure that we're clear on this, is that historically, American funds, the Growth Fund of America, has done very well in the past. But I mean, in the last 5 years, in this snapshot, I mean, I don't know if I would say, hey, this means something is catastrophically bad, but that doesn't look good.
When it comes to salesmen inside of the financial world, or salesmen who may be trying to get into your pocket, in short, they have a conflict of interest. Now, I want to be clear here. Conflicts of interest don't necessarily mean that it's always bad, because if we're going to be honest, we all have a conflict of interest.
We have a conflict of interest.
Even us, fee-only financial advisors, have a conflict of interest. So one of the things you have to do, and we'll talk about this in terms of like, how do you protect yourself? Do you understand the conflict of interest that is present? And do you understand how the advice that you are receiving interacts with that conflict of interest?
Yeah, I'll take it a step further, is that you also need to know not only how they get paid, but what legal requirement they're held to. Because, look, we are fiduciary financial advisors, but we have a conflict of interest. I mean, somebody comes to us and they want to pay off their mortgage. They need to kind of know what our thoughts on that. Fortunately, we've done a gazillion videos on that, so it's pretty easy to see. But it is a conflict of interest you'd have to know that, hey, these guys, if you paid off that big mortgage, it could impact how they're paid.
Sure.
So you want to understand that. But we also have that legal standard of fiduciary, whereas we're legally required to put your interest ahead of our own in that process. It's supposed to clean it up. There's a reason ERISA products, your 401k, your 403b, and so forth, they also have that fiduciary standard. There's a reason those insurance products aren't necessarily in there, like you see them on TikTok. Meanwhile, suitability standard, like you see with broker dealers, insurance products, other things, it is, and I give this analogy, and I apologize if you're a long-time listener, it's the difference between hiring a nutritionist versus somebody just giving you a candy bar at the grocery store.
It's very different.
Look, that candy bar is suitable for human consumption. But if you eat a bunch of candy bars, you're not going to be super healthy. Whereas you go to a nutritionist, they're going to tell you the best things to put in your body to be the healthiest version of yourself. That is the difference between suitability versus fiduciary. That suitability, you can go buy a product. Might not be the best product for you, but it's okay. It's suitable, like that candy bar is. Whereas a fiduciary standard is they are legally supposed to put your interest first.
So you just gave two great questions to ask whenever you're interacting with someone in the financial world, especially if it's someone who's in a sales position. You said, ask one question, how do you get paid? The second question is, do you operate in a fiduciary capacity? We actually have a resource for you. If you are thinking about hiring a financial advisor, if you're interacting with someone in the financial world, go download this deliverable. Go to moneyguy.com/resources. And we've just titled it 8 Questions to Ask Your Financial Advisor. And you can literally use this. Take it into your meeting, sit down with whoever you're talking with, and kind of run through these questions. And it will help you understand that even if the person you're sitting across from is a salesman, if they can answer and parse these questions well, there's a really good chance you are protecting yourself from getting ripped off.
Yeah. So go check it out, guys. I think you'll see it definitely is worth your time to go see these 8 questions to ask anybody who's selling you financial products.
All right, so the first type of person that we want to protect you from is a salesman, right? Well, there's another type that we think you ought to be aware of, and this is what we just kind of call this the Shyster category. And these are the folks who convince you to do something, but perhaps that thing that they're convincing you to do is not quite as good as the brochure might suggest.
Yeah, we started this one off with dumb doctor deals, and I know that is it's not a nice thing to call
why don't
people.
you talk about the etymology of that? Why have we dubbed it dumb doctor deals?
Well, I mean, I worked at a firm previously when we did a lot of private placements, and look, private placements aren't all bad. It's kind of like on the previous section I had to give the disclosure. My father was a salesman, so not all salesmen are out there crooking on you, but it is one of those things that there are people who have created an entire industry of trying to convince you to work against yourself by buying more complexity than you need. They market it in a way. This is why we call it dumb doctor deals, because we know doctors make great incomes. Now, look, they might have a lot of debt too, but they have great incomes. So it's not uncommon that they come into this income stream. They're not super sophisticated from a financial standpoint, and somebody gets a hold of them and says, hey, you want to know what rich people do? You want to know what's sexy, has a ton of sizzle? This is everybody who's making the type of money you make buys this. And then just off of that sizzle and the sexiness and the way it's marketed, they buy this thing without understanding really what you're getting into. And the reason these deals have a lot of, you got to put skull and crossbones or put that Surgeon General's warning on them just like they do cigarettes, is because the government doesn't give you the protection. They assume somebody who has this level of assets, this level of income, is a sophisticated individual, so you can go get ripped off to your heart's content because you have enough assets and enough income that you should know better. So that makes it ripe for somebody to come in there. Now, I do want to make sure we know, because I can hear Charles is probably out there who does a lot of real estate syndicates and other things. There are, and I've done private placements that have done really well for clients, because there is, just like you can have benefits with mutual funds where they bring assets together and you can buy in bulk much better than you can buy an individual. You can also cut the cost of due diligence, all these things. There's a place for private deals. I'm not taking away from that, but there's an entire industry that has now turned it into what's good, and they've taken it to a level where it's more about sales, more about enriching the people who put together these products than enriching the people who actually invest in it.
Yeah, so you said, Brian, you have to be, there's special types of folks that can even do this. You have to be an accredited investor, which means you either have certain asset levels or certain income. And you mentioned that it's not regulated in the same way that other types of investments are regulated. Well, one of the other big problems with private placements, like when you actually look at them and break them down, is they're pretty expensive from a fee standpoint. It's not incredibly uncommon to see something where you go into some sort of private deal and there might be an annual management fee. And these things can be big. It could be 2% a year that you're paying the manager of the deal. And then on top of that, you're also paying performance-based fees. Perhaps it's 20% of any of the performance or 20% over a certain watermark. In our estimation, we help clients kind of sort through these deals and figure out, does it make sense? Does it not make sense? Oftentimes, when you look at the performance you can garner from just a simple index fund relative to the after fee performance of what you're getting in some of these private placements that are illiquid, complicated, that complicate your tax situation, you start to say, man, was that really worth it? Did I really come out better because of that? So we're not saying that they're all bad, but we are saying they are often sold as much better than they are in reality.
Yeah, I would know what you're getting into. We give so much guidance on understanding your why or begin with the end in mind. It's because I think a lot of people get sold these things and they find out, since we have a K-1 that's going to be generated, our taxes are going to always be extended. Yep. I mean, these are things that go in, but here's some kind of due diligence you ought to consider. When you're talking, you get the placement document, I want you to try to read through this thing. Don't glaze over or gloss over it. I want you to get into the numbers and the weeds to figure out and run a scenario both if it does well versus also what happens when it doesn't do well, and then say how much is going to flow through to the investors, how much is going to flow through to the managing group that's putting this deal together. So that's one thing, because you might find they get rich either way. That's a concern because you want them on the same side of the table as you. So you want a lot of incentive for you to be rewarded as an investor, not just a way to enrich the managing or organizing group. Also, pay attention to those fees that Bo just described. Make sure they are industry standard or somewhat reasonable. And then here's something I always like to do to kind of separate the fluff from the reality. Ask that general partner, ask that management group or organization group how much of their own personal assets are in this deal, how much of their parents, relatives, friends. They should be able to talk to that in a way so you can know, is this something that they've packaged to enrich them, or is this something they've actually put their money in?
Skin in the game.
Because you want to make sure that they're worried about mama losing her money just as much as you're losing your money, and that's going to help you really kind of cut through what's going on here.
All right, let's talk about another area where we kind of see some, in our opinion, shysters exist. Now, we're not suggesting that this space, because this is going to be such a hot take for us, we're not suggesting that this space is nothing but shysters, but it is really interesting how this class has changed over the last couple of years. But cryptocurrencies and NFTs, this idea of digital assets, it appears to us that there are a lot of people, a lot of players, a lot of actors in that space that may have had more sinister ideas than they let on when they originally began attracting investors. And there was a huge headline that just hit. This came out back at the first. The SEC charged 11 people in an alleged $300 million crypto Ponzi scheme.
Yeah, this is not a foreign thing, because you can take assets that should be positive, should be cutting edge, unique, and then turn them negative. Think about like equities. We love equities. But pump and dump schemes, I mean, all you have to do is go watch that movie Boiler Room. Yeah, I mean, you see what there's schemers out there that will turn these what should be a positive thing, and they find the dark side of it to rip people off. Well, same things happen with cryptos, and the fact that, and by the way, we've done some React videos to some TikTokers who basically, when we watched the React, we were like, that sounds a lot like a Ponzi scheme, because they're like trying to encourage, get everybody you know in this thing, because as you get everybody in, the price will keep going up and up and up and up, and then you'll be able to sell it before it all falls down. That is the definition of a pyramid scheme, of a Ponzi scheme. And now I don't even, because when you make those statements, when we did the React series, people were like, that's so rude of you guys to make those allegations and say that. Well, look at this. The SEC just charged 11 people with a $300 million crypto Ponzi scheme. So now I'm not saying all, but it does confirm what we've been sharing. Be very careful, because the problem we've had with cryptos, they don't innovate. They don't. Now, look, blockchain's cool.
Sure, yeah.
I mean, it's no different. The internet was cool, but, webgrocer.com isn't going to make you a gazillion dollars just because they're on the internet. Same thing with cryptos. If you don't know what's driving the value, it's just that they've convinced somebody to pay more than they paid, because there's no dividend, there's no interest, there's no dividends, there's no innovation. It is one of those things. There's a reason old school investors like Warren Buffett are concerned about it. Pay attention to those things, because there are crooks out there.
And not only that, not only the crooked part, but obviously we're seeing some cracks and some trouble here. The U.S. equity markets have been in a bear market this year, right? But if you look at what's happened across the price of a lot of cryptos and NFTs, they've been like in a depression, with some of the major cryptocurrencies being down as much as like 70%. And so what we've seen is, as crypto prices have fallen, we've also seen a huge drop off in the sales of NFTs. If you look at this chart, this is from Non-Fungible. If you look at NFT sales per day from 2020 till now, sales have fallen by 91% in less than 1 year. If that doesn't sound like a bubble, if that doesn't sound like something that was too frothy, I don't know what does. And if you look at this chart, man, everyone telling you that this is what you ought to be doing with your money, what you ought to be doing with your life savings, this is the next frontier. I worry if you were to act on that advice right now, you're sitting there having some major, major regrets.
Yeah, I told when we were going through this in the content meeting, I was like, we could take out the NFT logo there or the icon and just put Tulip Mania from the 1600s, and there wouldn't be much different. I mean, this thing was all hype, all boost. Everybody got in a frenzy about it, and then it collapsed on itself. So just be careful. These type of things, because there's people, if there's ways to make money, people are going to be pumping stuff up, and you always need to be very careful of those things. Bo, talk to us about how do we protect ourselves?
Yeah, the big thing, and this is, again, a hot take. We live in the world of TikTok and Instagram, and the flashy, sexy sizzle is the thing that attracts eyeballs and gets views. Building wealth oftentimes is not super sexy. It's not super exciting. It's kind of boring, realistically.
Yeah.
If you just put in the foundational, fundamental steps to wealth building, it might not be something you talk at a cocktail party about. You might not want to tell someone, hey, guess what my savings rate was last year? Because they're just not going to flip out at that. But we've seen time and time and time and time again, it works. If you can get a solid financial foothold in place, then it's okay if you trickle into some of these more esoteric areas, but only in the right time. You have to make sure you're doing what you're supposed to be doing in the right order.
Yeah, it's one of those things, Bo, when I meet you at a cocktail party and you're telling me about your latest and greatest trading scheme or the individual stock that you bought, I'll smile and I just kind of absorb what
nice.
You're sharing. I
Okay.
don't really,
All right.
just take
Nice.
it in.
Great.
But if you live next door or you're a friend and we've gotten to the point where I actually feel a vested interest in trying to engage. I've had this type of moment where I've had dear friends who tell me when they're buying, whatever social media company's booming at the time, and they're telling me all the trading and all the stress with the volatility, and I'm just smiling. And then eventually we'll be sitting on their back porch and I'll be like, do you want to know what I do with my money? I buy index funds.
Yep.
I was like, that way I'm just getting the innovation of the market. I don't have to worry about all the calories and the emotional stuff of what's going up and down. I'm just always be buying. It just takes it out. And what's always great for me is when that friend, after they've watched this, they've experienced it, and they start paying attention and they go, you know what I realized this year? The market did great last year. I compared what I made with all my trading and hemming and hawing and worrying about things, and then I compared it to what that S&P 500 did. You made more money last year, didn't you? And I'm like, yeah,
That's
you're
the way
catching
it
on.
works.
I mean,
Yep.
this is, I know it's not sexy. I know, and truthfully, it's liberating because I don't have to waste mental capacity on that type of stuff. And that's why, look, we've put so much thought into this that we actually created the financial order of operations. I mean, just like math with, please excuse my dear Aunt Sally, there's a way, you better know where parentheses fall with addition, subtraction. There's an order of properly calculating math problems. It's the same thing with finance. Finance has so much math. You better understand what order to do your financial life to maximize your next dollar, and we give it away. If you go to moneyguy.com/resources, you can actually download this 9-step process.
And what I love about this is it serves as a guardrail from helping you get off course. If you just follow the financial order of operations, it's really kind of hard to screw it up because there are a lot of boxes you have to check before you start getting into the things like private placements or unique esoteric investments or that kind of stuff. That happens far enough along in your wealth journey. You know the sure steps that you've been taking. So you can go check out the resource, moneyguy.com/resources. We also have a course if you want to do a deep dive into this. You can go to learn.moneyguy.com and do a course. But perhaps you're someone saying, man, I hear you guys, but I've reached this level of success and I've been saving and I've been doing okay and I've got some wealth built up, but I do hear about my friends. They're doing these private placements. They're buying this proper. They're doing these other things. And I just don't know how to sift through what's good and what's not good and how do I know? And by the way, I have a day job and I have my family and I have these commitments. I wish I had someone in my corner to help me navigate that. That's another great way that you can protect yourself. If you feel like you're living in that world where people are constantly coming after you, trying to have you part with your dollars, perhaps that's a great time to take it to the next level, because we have no problem being the bad guy. We've done this a number of times where we'll sit in a pitch meeting with someone and we'll ask the hard questions. Hey, how much do you get paid on this? Hey, how much skin do you have in this? And that's okay, because you may be looking at the very first private equity deal you've ever looked at, but we've looked at hundreds of them, and we've been able to help clients navigate what does make sense and what doesn't make sense. So if you find yourself in that place, taking the relationship to the next level might not be a horrible idea.
And then before we close it out, I have one other thing, because I think people come to us sheepishly because they want us to work with us, they want to take the relationship to the next level, but they fancy themselves a stock picker, or they like doing crypto. And look, I resemble a lot of this. Everybody knows I have Tesla. Everybody knows that I dabbled in some cryptos because I felt like, to be better for you guys, I better get in there too to understand some of this stuff. The big thing we do, you don't have to keep this as a secret. You just come to us and we're just going to give you the guidance. It's okay to dabble in some of these things, but just don't let them be greater than 5% of your total financial assets. So we're okay. We're not one of those people who go pound you and about your lifestyle and doing these things and teetotal, don't do this. We're going to work with you to make sure you get to be the best version of yourself, but still go do the things that bring you happiness.
All right, so we're talking about how to help you guys protect yourselves. We talked about salesmen, but we gave a caveat. Not all salesmen are bad. And then we talked about shysters, but we said, not all the things in that space may be bad. This third one, there is no redeeming quality here. This is one that you want to protect yourself from, and I think these are the ones that we interact with the most, and these are the folks out there that are just flat out scammers.
Yeah, and without a doubt, and I love the graphic that we put this, that Daniel found a credit card with a fish hook in it, because they are straight up trying to rip you off and get access to your wallet, to your credit cards, to your money. I mean, so we want to kind of jump right into this to show you what you need to do to protect yourself.
And these folks are clever. We're going to show you a little clip right now. I want you to pay close attention, then we'll break it down. But it's almost genius how these criminals operate. Watch this.
Why did I randomly get sent $1,000 on PayPal? Sorry, I accidentally sent it to the wrong person. No worries, I'll just hit refund. Wait, the refund option charges me a fee. Instead, could you send it via friends and family? Sure, no problem. Hey PayPal, I accidentally sent $1,000 to the wrong person. Oh no, since they've impressed refund on the transaction, we'll charge $1,000 from their account to refund you. I've just lost $1,000 to a scammer. I should have followed Noah.
So here's what I find interesting. This ties into scams have a lot in common in the fact of the way they trick you, especially with modern technology. Mark Rober has an entire series on all these scammers. And go on that rabbit hole, by the way, and it'll make you go, how is Mark Rober able to do these things? And then you're like, we need the government to kind of reach out to Mark Rober, and he is starting to do some of these things. And I think he will make us a safer community, because these scammers, it's all the same thing. Is that Mark Rober, they when he did his thing, they targeted elderly people doing the exact same thing, where supposedly they accidentally sent you money. And then, where you get the scam is that you go through the legal means of sending them the money back that you weren't getting, and then they take the money through the back door, and then you're left holding the bag. And this is no different than the old school one where they used to get checks in the mail that were made payable to you. You go deposit it in your account, you'd see the money hit your account, and then of course it's a bad check, so it'd get yanked out a few days later. So these scams are evolving over time, where money comes your way, you pay them back, and then they make the money disappear. You need to protect yourself, because there are so many criminals out there right now that are trying to hit you through your email, through phone calls, through text messages. Bo, we've got to help people out, because, by the way, in the past, it was easy to spot the scammers. They used broken English, or they misspelled a bunch of words, or it was some company you weren't affiliated with. They've gotten so much better with the phishing Now they even call it spear phishing.
Yeah, it's wild. So we know about phishing, right? We know about the Nigerian prince who's reaching out to us to try to like have us inherit the $1 billion, right? Well, now it's getting a lot more specific than that. Somehow, through a data breach or through something else that might have happened, these criminals, these scammers know something about you. Perhaps they know that you bank at Wells Fargo, or perhaps they know that you've set up an account at Chipotle, or fill in the blank, and they're able to send a very targeted email that doesn't seem off the wall. It doesn't seem like something that would be completely insane. It's actually some truth that it has something to do with your life, and they send you an email to click on a link, to go to a page, to log into a thing, and just like that, you have been infiltrated.
Yeah, and Bo, we have a culture of compliance here. And
yeah, we do.
Part of being a culture of compliance, Bo has to give us compliance training pretty much every month. I mean, you come in and do a presentation to the entire team here at Abound, and I thought we grabbed a few things that showed up at the most recent compliance meeting. But what are some of the top 5 email phishing subject lines?
Yeah, it's really interesting. This is as of Q1 2022. Here are the top 5 most common that you're likely to see. Here's one. HR, new requirements tracking COVID vaccinations. Obviously, that's a very current event that a lot of people would be super interested in, and it would seem legit. Oh, my company's done something new. I need to click on this. I need to figure it out. Or maybe you've seen this one. Password check required immediately. And you think, oh no, I got to make sure my password's okay. So they ask you to click on the link, go log in, you enter your password, which is the right one, but then they tell you, oh, wrong password. And you do that a few times. Well, they've already gotten your actual password. They've already logged in, and they're, off to the races. Vacation policy update, dress code changes, or hey, we need you to acknowledge your appraisal, or we need you to confirm receipt of the fill in the blank. It's not uncommon to see these things come through, so you need to make sure that you're protecting yourself. You need to make sure when you do receive something, you actually know the person that you are receiving it from. We'll talk about this in a moment, but like Microsoft.com doesn't need to have it reroute to billybobswebpage.microsoft.com. That's a surefire sign that it's not something you need to be doing. Another little trick you can do is hover your mouse over any link before you click on it. If you hover on it, it'll tell you what URL you're actually routing to. I can't tell you how many times something will look legit. You can hover over it, you determine that it's nefarious, you delete it, get rid of it, and completely avoid walking into the trap.
Well, I think some of these, like we have the subject lines here, but what makes it spear phishing versus regular phishing is, and I've seen this actually happen, like it's not uncommon that maybe an employee of a title company or that intermediary that handles real estate closings, that their system has been compromised. Well, the crooks don't just start telling you that they've compromised your system. They start culling your information to figure out how they actually create profit by scheming. So it's not uncommon that maybe the real estate attorney's office or the title company has been compromised. They don't realize they're compromised, but when there's a closing coming up, that acknowledge your appraisal or here's the wiring instructions, they might be front running and sending alternative wiring instructions. They could be, it's not uncommon in HR departments. Payroll, they will email the payroll department. They'll go on the website, see all the list of the employees' names, and then they'll send to HR, hey, so-and-so wants to update their direct deposit account. These are the type of things that are going on all over the place. I've known people personally wiring money to inappropriate places because everything looked right. The name of the title company, the real estate was listed. That's how you know somebody was compromised somewhere in the cycle of communication. Be on guard at all time, because a lot of these financial things, when the money goes,
you can't get it back.
Gone. It's hard to get it back. So just be very aware when you're dealing with financial decisions.
Another thing that's really interesting, we also have the top 10 most impersonated companies. So always be on high alert. If you get an email from Facebook, Microsoft, WhatsApp, Amazon, Chase, Comcast, PayPal, Netflix, started talking really fast.
Adobe. These are all very popular things.
Yeah, so if you get an email from one of these, ask the question, why is this person reaching out to me? Is this something that's legit? Or is this something where I'm being targeted? The best advocate for you is you. So the better you can make sure you're taking careful steps, the more likely you are to protect yourself.
And Bo, it would be crazy if we didn't mention this, because you guys send this to us and we're like, oh, you got to be kidding me. Seriously?
Happens all the time.
And by the way, we're going to show you examples from like Instagram, but on YouTube, there's people that will take our logo file and they'll use WhatsApp and they try to tell you, hey, reach out to me. We don't solicit anybody that way. If you see a WhatsApp, the only time I've used WhatsApp is when I was in Dominican Republic on vacation and the concierge person on the hotel wanted to communicate that way. I don't use WhatsApp. So that's not the way we're communicating with our listeners. It's not the way we're communicating with our clients. Be on guard, but look at what's going on Instagram. I mean, we have these fake impersonators. And they even take our pictures. They take our posts.
That's messed up. They ripped one of
populate.
our team lunches. Those are our people having lunch one day.
It looks like us. I mean, remember, we even had the case where the impersonators reported us as the fake. And for a slight second, Facebook and Instagram actually agreed with the Crooks.
They shut us down.
Yeah, those guys are the fakers. And it was like, I felt like the Spider-Man pointing at each other. It was the weirdest thing in the world. But here's the thing I want to put everybody on guard on. If you ever go subscribe to us. That's crooking right there. That how in the world do these platforms as well as the government not know how to cut off the bots who, as soon as you subscribe to our channel, the bots know you subscribe to the point that they immediately show up and try to DM you and be like, hey, I see you subscribe to us. You want to get on some of that crypto? We don't do that. You think I have an entire team here. There ain't a single person that's working on DMing any of our followers on Instagram. Just be on guard about that. I loved because y'all shared with us your conversations with the Crooks, and you guys could tell immediately that something was wrong.
We're not slinging cryptos or binary trade options via social. So make sure you stay on guard. If you follow folks on Instagram, if you follow folks on social, and all of a sudden out of nowhere they start reaching out to you, your red flag should go up. You should also look at the usernames. Make sure the username is actually the username that you follow. Ours is Money Guy Show. It's not Money Guy Show 0 or money _ whatever. So just make sure you are staying diligent and don't share personal, private, unique information, even with your favorite influencers via Instagram or via social media. So how do we protect ourselves? What are some ways that we can stay safe against scammers?
Yeah, and this is just to keep you safe overall from a cyber standpoint. When you're on your computer, I mean, the biggest thing, and by the way, I've been totally picking on my oldest daughter right now. I think everybody ought to use multi-factor authentication. That way, even if you have somebody's password, it's pretty much worthless if you don't have that 6-digit code that comes through from a Google Authenticator or something like that. Even if you can't because not everywhere is set up for multi-factor, like the 6 authenticator apps and so forth. At least do 2-factor, but that has some vulnerabilities, lots of vulnerabilities actually, more than multi-factor. But we love having some type of authentication process to very important websites to you.
Another really great thing you can do is use a password manager like LastPass. I think Dashlane is another one. What this allows you to do is have very complicated passwords that you can update, that you can change, and that way you don't have any overlap. A lot of the breaches we've seen over the last number of years, Chipotle. I feel bad picking on Chipotle. I'm gonna use a different one.
Use something that's a known. Like even some of the credit reporting agencies have been compromised, so it's not uncommon that your stuff is out there.
Yep. And so what might happen is your credit reporting agency username and login might have gotten hacked. Well, then they just go try that at SunTrust and Wells Fargo and Bank of America and Fidelity and Vanguard, and they just try to get lucky. So if you have unique usernames, unique passwords, you're going to protect yourself. Well, one of the best ways to keep up with very unique passwords and very unique usernames is using a password manager.
Yeah, and I fought this for a long time, and then I got to tell you, I'm actually annoyed if I find any part of my life that's not within the password manager, because it's so easy. You can have a 16-digit passcode with all the crazy asterisks and symbols, and it keeps up with it all without any problem. And I'm telling you, you're going to love it. If you will give this thing a go, you're going to find it makes your life safer as well as easier and better.
Another thing that you can do, by the way, I just want to say, I do not dislike Chipotle. I'm actually hungry right now. It's lunchtime. That's why I keep saying Chipotle. I just feel like that needs to be on the record. Thank you, Daniel. You can write that down. Another great thing that you can do to protect yourself, freeze your credit. I'm amazed at how easy this process has become, that you can go out to the 3 credit report agencies. You can put a freeze on your credit. So if you're not going out and getting new credit cards, new cars, new auto loans, it almost seems silly not to do this to keep yourself protected. And that way, nobody can go open up lines and steal your identity and run up a bunch of debt in your name.
Yeah, and the thought process is super easy. I mean, because if you're using a password manager and then you're freezing your credit, you can unfreeze it. I mean, we've got some bank deals that they've asked us to run our credit files. We're all frozen up. I said, hey, tell me which credit reporting agency you're actually using, because that's the cool thing about thawing. Even if you are going to refinance your house, go buy a new car that you're financing, you could find out, hey, who are you using when you do financing, and you can thaw it out like the next, but within a few hours. These things are pretty instant right now, and you can even put a window. Like we right now, we put a window on that one for like a week, so that it's probably shutting down any time now, just in case the scammers
all you
paying
scammers
attention.
out there, our credit's frozen.
Yeah,
right
there's
now.
a lot more crooks trying to use your credit than I'm trying to use my own credit, so it makes complete sense to lock it down. Because, I mean, if I'm not going to be out there applying for stuff, why should anybody be able to apply? So go ahead and freeze your credit. You'll be happy you did.
And then we already talked about this. Don't click on unfamiliar links in emails. Don't open attachments from folks that you don't recognize and aren't coming from. And this is another one you may not recognize. Don't use public Wi-Fi if you have sensitive data on the device. If you're using your work computer, using your work phone, whatever, and there's sensitive stuff on there, be very careful connecting to public Wi-Fi, because it has gotten much easier for those networks to be compromised.
Or at a minimum, use a VPN
There
type
you go.
thing that will also encrypt it, and let you be a somewhat safer than just strapping yourself in on somebody's Wi-Fi and them getting access to a lot of your information.
At the end of the day, you work hard for your dollars. You work hard for the wealth that you are building, but there's another force at play working just as hard to take it from you. So if you can figure out how to protect yourself against the folk trying to sell you stuff that you don't need, the Shysters trying to get you to get involved in things that you don't need to be involved with, and the scammers that are literally trying to rob you, if you can have a solid defense in place, it's going to make your wealth building journey much easier and much more successful.
Guys, go check it out. MoneyGuy.com. Tons of free stuff at MoneyGuy.com/resources. We, of course, have deep dives and courses to accelerate your wealth building process and journey. That's learn.moneyguy.com. And last, we love working with clients all across the country. If your life has gotten complex financially, we are the solution. You can go check that out at both moneyguy.com or aboundwealth.com. We have a work with us section. Got to go check that out as well. I'm your host, Brian Preston, Mr. Bo Hansen, Money Guy team, out.